Welcome to AlgoGAN. In today's video, we will look at the life cycle of an Android activity. As part of that, we will learn what is an activity, what is the life cycle of an activity, and as a developer, how you going to use different methods of Android activity to achieve what you want to achieve. So what is an activity? Activity is one of the main components of Android that is used to display the UI. You might be wondering what else can be there other than UI. There are many apps that you can find in App Store and elsewhere which doesn't necessarily display UI. They can be running some background services, or they might just be sharing data using content providers and so on. So Android, the activity is the main component that is used to display the UI. But yes, most of the apps that you see have at least one activity in them. So for example, if you want to show a list of contacts, uh, then you would create an activity with a recycler view in it, which gets data from a database, contacts database, and displays that on your UI. Similarly, if you want to have a media player application, you can do so as well using an activity. So what is the life cycle of an activity? Life cycle of an activity is nothing but the different methods that gets called at different phases of an activity's life cycle. uh, for example, user, like when user launches an activity, Android frameworks creates an instance of that activity and calls the method called onCreate. Let's have a look at the Android activity lifecycle diagram. So as soon as the activity gets launched, framework creates the instance of an activity and then it calls onCreate. This is the place generally developers can use to instantiate different resources that are used by the activity, and then it calls, as it displays it on the window, it calls the on start followed by on resume. So at this point you can say Android, the activity is in resumed state and user can interact with the activity like clicking buttons or watching a video. And if the activity is partially obscured by some other window, then the on pause of that activity gets called, and if it's fully obscured by some other activity, then on stop will be called. When the activity is removed from the stack, then on destroy will be called, and then so on. So if user comes back to the activity, then again system creates a new instance of that activity and calls those respective methods. So here, for example, if user is interacting with the activity and suddenly an alarm rings or some other window comes on top of your activity which partially obscures your view, then just on pause will be called, on stop will not be called. Then as soon as that window moves away, then it again goes back to the resume state. At that point on resume will be called. But if at that point, if user navigates away from the activity by pressing a home screen, or by taking action on the other window that appears on top, if user moves away from that activity, then on stop will be called. And if user comes back, let's say we can come back to the same activity by clicking resend. So if user does that, then on start will be called and on resume follows that. Here on destroy won't be called because that activity was not destroyed. It just came back to the same user came back to the same activity again. So in some cases activity can be destroyed if user leaves the screen user leaves the activity for a long time, or user presses back key on a given activity. Then at that point on destroy will be called, and then user whenever comes back to the activity, the new instance of that activity will be uh, created. Here if you noticed, there is another method called on restart. On restart will be called when the system recreates the activity due to any configuration change events, which we learn later. Let's quickly look at an example so that we'll have a better understanding of what I'm talking. So I have created a simple application where I've overridden all the lifecycle methods of an activity: on create, on start, on resume, on pause, on stop, and on destroy. So let's run this application. I've added logs in each of these lifecycle methods, and let's see at what point these logs get printed. So let's go to the emulator. Yep. The activity got launched, and let's go to logcat. As you can see, let's filter it out by the activity name. As you can see, these are the last three logs it created: started and resumed. Let me clear the logs, and again we'll relaunch it. See, on pause, on stop, on destroy were called, but anyway, let's do it again. So I'm launching the activity now. So it created a new instance and immediately called on create, followed by on start and on resume. So if I press home button, on pause and on stop were called, but on destroy was not called because the activity is still there in the stack. So if I go back to the activity, it resumes it by calling on start and on resume. If I press back key, at that point the activity gets destroyed. So let's see what methods get called. So I press the back key, and then on pause, on stop, and on destroy all are called. So let me clear the logs and relaunch the activity again. See, at this time it created a new instance again, and then it called the on create, on start, and on resume. Now let's talk about how you can use these different lifecycle methods to develop different kinds of applications. So here, if you see, on create is generally used to initialize all the resources that are used by your application or your activity. And the other method, on destroy, is used to release all the resources that you initialized in on create. If you see the on start and on stop, these generally, these gets called when the activity is visible on the UI. So these methods are generally used to register for any broadcasts, and to listen to any other events across the system, so that user can be informed, or you can take as a developer you can take some actions based on those different events. For example, you can register for battery events or data available events in on start, and you can unregister for them in on stop. And in on resume and on pause, you can use these methods to uh, take any action. For example, like if you are playing a if you are playing a video on the device, as soon as user was interrupted with any other dialogue, uh, immediately in the on pause you can pause the video, and if the dialogue goes away without causing on stop, then you can immediately resume that video, or you can use the sim- those methods for a game to pause the game and to resume the game. Yeah, this is how you can use these different lifecycle methods to achieve the desired behavior in your app. Hope you understood the activity lifecycle. If you like the video, please subscribe and do a thumbs up. Thank you.